I'm Mektub, and yes, today we are reading another book. This is an Ever After High, Once Upon a Twist. This is the last one that I have because my library doesn't have the other two, which is disappointing, but eventually I will figure out how to get them, so yeah, let me know if you want me to go buy them, because I will. I need an excuse. Anyways, this is Ever After High, Once Upon a Twist, Cerise and the Beast. This is the one that my other chapters, they had more than one chapter in it. These ones only have 7 plus an introduction, so 8. That introduction's really short. So I don't know if there will be more than one chapter in each chapter. I would assume so, but I don't know. Anyways, let's read the back. It says, Once Upon a Twist. Things have gone topsy-turvy at Ever After High after Fabel Thorne cast a spell on midterm exams. The students find themselves unexpectedly inside a wrong storybook. When Cerise Hood and Dexter Charming realize they've become Beauty and the Beast, they both think it's a royal fairy tale. Cerise and Dex are determined to fit in this story, even if they're better off being themselves. Can this team find their very own way to a happily ever after? Again, I have no clue what book is supposed to be the first one. I'm kind of just reading them in whatever order, so apologies if these are all out of order, but let's start reading the introduction. Fabel Thorne was having a very good day. Just that morning, she caused some great dark fairy trouble, and the fun was only just getting started. Ever since she cheer hexed a spell on the midterm exam storybooks, all the characters in Ever After fairy tales had been mixed up. She smiled as she remembered the spell she had cheer hexed. Study hard and listen well as I start to cast my spell. Whether you're a princess, prince, or witch, it's time to get ready for a great big switch. SWITCH switch. Cupid had ended up in Ashlyn Ella's story and had to be Cinderella for a while. Fabel wished she could have seen Cupid cooking and cleaning for the 2 stepsisters and their mother. It serves her right, Fabel thought. Cupid was far too sweet for Fabel's taste. As the daughter of the dark fairy, Fabel didn't stand sweetness. And then there was the fact that she never turned down the chance to cause some mischief and mayhem. That's why she had decided to cast a spell that caused all of these big switches, and now nobody was in the right fairy tale for the exam, and they would just have to deal with the consequences. Fabel couldn't wait to find out whose fairy tale she tangled up next. And that is the end of the introduction. Let's start with chapter 1. This is chapter 1, A Wolf in Princess Clothing. Where in Ever After am I? Cerise wondered. She looked around, expecting to see the beloved woods and lake and the spectacular outdoors that were part of her story, but instead she was standing on a hard marble floor. It was a magnificent floor and polished to perfection, but Cerise couldn't imagine what it was doing in her fairy tale. She took an unsteady step. Whoa! Cerise let out a big yelp as she toppled to the floor. What in Ever After? She thought when she saw what had made her trip. She wasn't wearing her usual dress with leggings and laced-up boots, but a puffy pink gown and satin heels. Oh dear, are you okay, miss? Please let me help you. A maid with a worried look on her face rushed to Cerise's side. She immediately started fussing with Cerise's clothes and smoothing her dress. Thanks, I'm okay, Cerise assured her. Are you sure? You look like you took quite a tumble there, the maid said. No, really, I'm good, Cerise said as the maid reached to fix Cerise's hair. Cerise quickly put her hands up to her ears. Her hood was gone. She immediately parted to smooth her hair. Thanks, but I'm totally got this. Don't worry about it, she told the maid. She didn't want the maid to spot the 2 wolf ears. They were Cerise's big secret, her family's big secret. She was the daughter of Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf, so Cerise was part wolf. No one in Ever After knew that her parents had gone off book, except Cerise's best friend forever after, Madeline Hatter and Raven Queen, and Cerise was determined to keep it that way. Wherever after was she? Well, if you're certain you're okay, I'll finish dusting the parlor, the maid said. Please don't hesitate to call for me if you need anything at all. Thanks a bunch. Oh, what's your name? Cerise asked. The maid let out a laugh. You're such a funny princess. Have you bumped your crown? It's me, Sarah. I've been your maid since you came to stay here at the castle, the woman said with a gentle smile. Now, if you'll excuse me, the parlor is waiting, and the chef has already set out some food for your breakfast on the table. Okay, Cerise replied, even though she was completely confused. First things first, she thought, did she say castle? Did she say princess? I need to find out exactly what's going on here. She took a good look back around. Beside the marble floor, there was an enormous full-length mirror in the corner with a fancy solid gold frame. There was a huge picture window with a velvet drapes and the longest, plushest-looking couch Cerise had ever seen, covered with silk pillows. There was an exquisite mahogany table, and it was heaped with every type of breakfast food imaginable: pancakes and waffles, throne cakes and muffins, scrambled eggs, oatmeal, and a bowl of fresh fruit salad. Delicate plates rimmed with gold and sparkling silverware decorated with gemstones completed the spectacular spread. Well, I am definitely in a new fairy tale, Cerise thought. This doesn't look anything like the storybook in Little Red Riding Hood. Cerise loved going on new adventures and exploring, so she couldn't help but feel excited about having fallen in the wrong fairy tale. She would worry about why it had happened later. For now, she would have just tried to figure out where she was. Based on her surroundings, she knew she had fallen in a fairy tale with a beautiful castle, but so many fairy tales had castles that the possibilities were practically endless. Who else is here? She wondered. She followed her instincts and decided to explore. There was a beautiful grand piano in the living room with fresh flowers were everywhere. The flowers were very beautiful, exotic blooms with orchids and long-stem roses. As beautiful as they are, I prefer wildflowers, Cerise thought, though these roses are pretty excellent. She peeked around the corner and spotted Sarah, the maid, speaking to a man wearing a huge chef's hat and nodded his head at whatever she was telling him. They both looked happy. Cerise already knew Sarah was friendly, and she had a feeling that the man in the chef's hat was too. Well, this looks like a nice place to visit, Cerise thought, but I really need to figure out which story I've landed in. As she walked past the full-length mirror, she did a double take. Is this really me? She thought, looking over at her reflection. Cerise barely recognized herself in a fancy ball gown and the dainty satin heels she wore. The outfit was pretty, but she felt strange wearing it. I'm sure Applewhite or Briar Beauty would love this, but it's not really my style. She hoped there was a change of clothes somewhere in the big castle. Suddenly she heard someone calling her name. Cerise, it's me, Dexter. What's going on? What are we doing here? Cerise ran down the hall straight into Dexter, charming, sort of. He sounded just like Dexter, but he sure didn't look like Dexter. He was big and tall and covered in fur. What the heck's happened to Dexter? Cerise wondered. She wasn't sure, but she was still happy to see him. She and Dexter weren't BFFAs, but Cerise had always liked the shy, charming brother. They'd had a few classes together ever after, and she knew Dexter was a excellent student. Just then, Cerise remembered that she didn't have her hood, and she quickly started playing with her hair to make sure her wolf ears were hidden. A moment later, Cerise put everything together and realized what fairy tale they had both fallen into. The castle, her clothes, Dexter covered in fur. It must be Beauty and the Beast. Now, what am I supposed to do? Cerise thought anxiously. Of all the fairy tales to drop in, she didn't know the first thing about being Beauty. Beauty was definitely a princess, and Cerise was probably the most unprincess-like girl ever after high. How and ever after would she make it to the end of the fairy tale in which she had to be one of the most famous princesses of all time? Dex, I think I know why you're a beast. We were actually sent into the Beauty and the Beast story, Cerise told him. Dexter was stunned. He looked at his furry arms. What does that mean? He asked. All I know is that we need to make it back to Ever After High, and we need to pass our exams to do it. That means we have to make it to the end of the storybook. It's just that the storybook is now Beauty and the Beast, Cerise thought aloud as Dexter's furry face went from looking confused to panic. Dexter, don't worry. This should be a piece of throne cake for you, Cerise told him. I'm the one who's going to have a problem being a princess. What do I know about being a princess? But you're charming. Your brother's daring is destined to be the real beast. You were basically born to do this. My destiny is to be a prince. A human prince, Dexter said. Not a beast prince covered in fur with giant hands and feet. And not only that, But then Dexter stopped. Not only that, what? Cerise asked. Oh, never mind, Dexter said sadly before wandering off the castle library. Cerise sighed. She was used to being in the great outdoors, not being cooped up in a fancy castle. She walked over to the window and looked out alongside the woods. This fairy tale is going to be a royal carriage wreck, she thought. How was she even ever going to get the hang of being a princess? She was nothing like Apple or Briar or Rosabella Beauty. Her fairy tale didn't have a fancy castle or poofy dress. Would she ever be able to make it to the end of this end while trying to be Beauty? But then she shook her head defiantly. It was time for some positive thinking. She was going to make it to the end, pass her exam, and get home to Ever After High no matter what. And that is the end of Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Does This Ball Gown Come with a Hood? Cerise took a deep breath. Okay, one step at a time, she thought. First things first, she needed to find a hood, and fast. There was no point in worrying about becoming Beauty when she had her wolf ears popping out for anyone to see. Cerise went through every closet in the castle in search for a hood. She found a closet full of crowns and tiaras. They were exquisite, but no matter how she angled them, not one completely covered her ears. Plus, she'd have to wear whatever she picked all the time, and she'd look pretty silly wearing a tiara with her pajamas. Next, Cerise found a chest filled with hats. At first, she was excited because what could be more perfect? She was certain she'd find a hat she could use to place of her hood. But as she tried on hat after hat, her hopes of finding the right one got smaller and smaller. There were some delicate flowery hats that barely covered her ears. There was an enormous straw beach hat with which a wide brim she could barely make it through the doorway. There was a top hat, but it was so very tall she had a hard time keeping her balance while wearing it. Now I understand how Goldilocks felt, Cerise groaned. Some of these hats are too big, others are too small, but none of them are just right. She hesitated. When she came to the kitchen closet, as she doubted she could find anything useful there, might as well check just to be sure, she told herself. But there was no hats or hoods in the pantry. She found a big wooden bowl and for a second considered whether it would make a good hat before realizing how silly that was. Keep your hood on straight, Cerise, she told herself, and she put the bowl aside. When she ever find the right fit? Then out of the corner of her eye she spotted the chef's hat. Maybe hope wasn't lost yet. She carefully put the tall hat on her head. Yeah, that kind of works, she thought. Now all I need to do is find an excuse to wear the chef's hat. Would Dexter believe I wanted to become a chef? I do love food, Cerise thought, and I love helping my mom bake pies with all our family, with our old family recipe. Speaking of her mom's recipe, Cerise spotted a big bowl of excellent-looking berries on the kitchen counter. A piece of Mom's wild berry pie would definitely help make me feel better right now. Cerise's heart dropped when she realized that the pies probably weren't part of Beauty's story. Now, more than ever, Cerise wished she were in her own storybook, where she fit in. She missed her village and her family. She missed her mom and dad. They always made things better. She thought, maybe some wild berry pie would do the trick. Checking first to make sure the coast was clear, Cerise grabbed the berries off the counter and tries her very best to remember her mom's recipe. A sprinkle of this and a dash of that, and Cerise was ready to put her pie in the oven. It wasn't quite Red Riding Hood quality, but she'd done her best, and sure, it did smell delicious. She smiled happily until she caught a glimpse of herself in the shiny lid. She realized that her ears had popped out of the chef's hat and were totally exposed. All this hat is good for is inspiring me to bake, Cerise thought. She groaned. She'd almost forgotten where she was, and her favorite red hood was missing. In desperation, she returned to her bedroom and pulled everything out of the closet, determined to find something that could work. But she looked at the massive pile of clothes, blanking and sheets in front of her. blankets and sheets in front of her. She realized she knew nothing about making herself a hood. Her mom always made her hoods, and Cerise didn't learn how to sew yet. But now she was in a bind, and she'd have to at least try to make a hood. "You got this, Cerise," she told herself. The first thing she tried were some big blanket piles on top of her head, and they were so heavy they wouldn't stay put. Next, she tried tying a fuzzy sweater around her hair as a makeshift headband, but it was too itchy and it didn't cover her ears. Crash! Just then something or someone came bounding into her room. What in ever after was that? Cerise thought. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice muffled from being buried under the huge pile of clothes. "Cerise, it's just me, Dexter. What are you up to?" "Oh, Dex, hi. I'm just, looking for something comfy to put on. You know, the old saying, a closet full of ball gowns has nothing to wear. Haha, what's up?" "So you're having a hard time too, huh?" Dexter asked sadly. "Turns out having big furry paws is even harder to deal with than you'd think. I've been fumbling around and knocking into things with my new tail and accidentally squishing things in my big paws. I'm not good at being the beast. Plus, I was hungry and tried to fix myself a snack, but I ended up making a huge mess. I feel terrible asking the servants to fix a disaster on their own. I was wondering if you could come down and help me clean it up. I'm afraid I'll just make everything 10 times worse if I try to straighten it up by myself." "Poor Dex," Cerise thought from behind the pile of clothes, "but I can't help him clean up until I have something to cover me." "Sorry, Dex," Cerise called out, "but I'm kind of buried in work at the moment. Maybe I can help you later." "Okay, sure," Dexter said. "I'll see you later." Cerise heard a crashing sound. What was that?" Cerise called in concern. "I just bumped into your dresser on the way out. I knocked over a couple things. I tried to pick them up, but I'm afraid I'd break them." "Don't worry about it," Cerise said. So Dexter left, and as he did, he crashed into the door and let out a wail, which didn't sound the least bit beastly. It sounded more like a cute little baby dragon yelping. "I'm never getting to the end of the fairy tale," Dexter said sadly. And that is the end of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Better Together. The minute Dexter left, Cerise climbed out from under the clothes. She felt bad about not helping Dexter. "Now I feel like a beast," she thought miserably. But she just couldn't take a chance at Dexter seeing her wolf ears. Cerise felt very stressed out, and she needed a break from worrying about becoming beauty and about Dexter finding out her secret. She knew she just needed to relax, and nothing made her feel more herself than being at home. It was time to go outdoors. She grabbed the pink sheet off her bed and quickly concocted a makeshift hood. It was tied kind of lopsided and it didn't really stay up straight, but at least she could leave the castle for a while with her ears safely covered. She found a skirt that was more comfortable than the big poofy dress and quickly slipped it on. Now she was ready to run. All Cerise needed was a basket stuffed with snacks to keep her full while she was out. She was still a hood ever after all. But when Cerise walked into the kitchen, she found Dexter fumbling around trying to pick cookies off the floor with his big paws. Every time he managed to grab one, he'd press too hard and it became a pile of crumbles. "Here, let me help you with that," Cerise offered and started to gently pick up the cookies one by one. "Thanks, Cerise," Dexter said gratefully. He next tried picking up some of the eggs, but that was even more of a disaster. Soon his furry paws were a big, gooey mess. "Scrambled eggs, anyone?" Dexter joked. Cerise laughed with him. "Why don't you leave and pick up stuff to me?" Cerise told Dexter. She handed him a mop. "You can help me mop up the floor." "Ah, that I can do," Dexter said. Soon the kitchen was spotless and gleaming again. Once everything was in its place, Cerise looked around. "We make a pretty good team," she observed. "We do." "Yes, we do," Dexter answered with a smile. Then Cerise spotted a pretty little basket and remembered why she'd come down there in the first place. Dexter seemed okay now, and she was sure he'd be fine on his own for a while as the beast. He was charming, and a charming was meant to be a prince, and princesses, meant to be princes and princesses, unlike the hoods and bad wolves. So, Dexter, I think I'm going to pack a basket, take a walk, Cerise said awkwardly. "Oh, okay, I guess I'll just hang out in the garden," Dexter replied, and he slumped He slumped out of the room. Sorry, lots of pauses. Cerise hoped she was right that Dexter would make a great beast without her help, and she started to make her way out of the castle with her freshly packed basket. But just as she arrived at the front gate, a strange noise made her stop in her tracks. Cerise looked around and discovered Dexter sitting alone in the garden, trying to howl and flailing horribly. Cerise stifled a giggle. Dexter's attempt to howl sounded like a hungry baby goat. She shook her head and she quietly turned the handle. But as she took her one last quick look at Dexter, she stopped herself. His head was buried in his arm, and he looked so upset. Maybe I was wrong about Dexter. I can't leave him here alone. I just can't, Cerise thought. At least I can teach him how to howl. She shut the front gate, turned around, and walked over to the garden. You know, the howl sounded kind of pathetic, Cerise joked as she sat down next to Dexter. Dexter looked up, and Cerise was startled with those tears in his eyes. I was only teasing, she told him. I'm sorry. Just tell me what's wrong. Maybe I can help. Dexter let out a heavy sigh. It's not you, he said. It's this fairy tale. He waved his furry paws at the castle grounds. I'm expected to be a gallant beast, but it's just not me. I will never be me. And it just reminds me how I'll never be half the prince my brother Daring is. I'm not brave or strong or great at sports. I'm clumsy and I get scared of things, and I'm better at studying than at sports. Does that sound like a fairy tale prince to you? I think there are all sorts of fairy tale princes, and none are better than the others, Cerise said honestly, but I can see how it must be tough to live up to the charming family name and reputation, she added softly. It's hard to feel like you can have to be something you're not. There's a reason Daring is destined to be the beast, and I'm not, Dexter continued. I can't even howl, as you heard before. Cerise realized that Dexter didn't feel at home here either. He didn't think he could be the beast, just the same as Cerise didn't think she could be Beauty, and that made Cerise feel a little better. At least she had Dexter's understood each other. I get it, Dex, Cerise told him. How do you think I feel? She stuck out her foot and showed him the fancy heels. I mean, just look at these shoes. They're pretty, Dexter said. What's so bad about them? They're pretty, yes, but you don't think I can wear them when I run through the woods and pick wild berries. But you're a princess in this fairy tale, Dexter reminded her. I'm sure someone can pick berries for you. I really just want to do it myself, Cerise said. I want to run through the woods and pick my own berries and wildflowers. I want to chase rabbits and squirrels, and I want to... Okay, I get it, Dexter laughed. So I'm not a proper prince and you're not a princess. What do you think we should do? Where do we go from here? I'm not sure yet, Cerise admitted, but whatever we're going, I know we're going together. 2 heads are better than 1 and all that deal. Cerise put her hand on Dexter to shake. Deal, Dexter said with a chuckle, and he awkwardly shook her hand with his paws. I'm glad you're here, Cerise, Dexter said. And I'm glad you're here too, Cerise told him. They both sat quietly for a moment. Suddenly Dexter's furry face brought out a sly grin. I have to ask you something, he said, pointing to the sheet tied around her. Are bed sheets really what princesses are wearing this season? Cerise set out a little yelp at her hands quickly flew to her head. She had completely forgotten she was wearing a bed sheet. Dexter seemed like a very nice guy, and he was happy to get to know him better, but she couldn't show him her wolf ears. She just couldn't. I know I must look silly, she said slowly, but I don't feel comfortable without my hood, and this, she gestured to the sheets, was the best I could come up with. Well, I think that's something I can help you with, Dexter offered. Looks like, let's look through your closet together. I'm sure we can find something more comfortable for you than a bedsheet. Growing up with a princess for a sister, I know a thing or two about princesses' fashion, he told her shyly. Thanks, Dex, Cerise said appreciatively, and I can help you too. With a little practice, I'll have you howling like a pro. Really? You know how to howl? Dexter asked. Sure, listen to this, said Cerise, threw her head back and howled with all her might. Dexter was shocked and impressed. Wow, a hood who can howl? That's not something you see every day. Where'd you learn how to do that? He asked. My dad showed me, Cerise said without thinking. He was a champion howler. A champion howler? Dexter said doubly. Yes, Cerise said. It was a hobby of his, and I can teach you too. Cerise stood up and stretched. But first, let's have a little race. Beauty versus Beast. A race? Dexter asked. Why? Running is great for relieving stress, Cerise explained. Then she pointed straight ahead. She kicked off her satin heels. Let's race to the little clearing in the woods and back here. First one back wins. Ready, Beast? Ready, Beauty, he answered. On your mark, get set, go. And they took off for a moment. Cerise considered slowing down a bit, but she couldn't help herself. It just felt so good to run with all her might. When the race was over, it wasn't even close. Cerise won. And that is the end of chapter 3.